Are you guys having a great morning? Are you guys happy about the Bitcoin price? Let's not ask that. All right, awesome. So this panel is called Digital Assets, Legal, Security, and Diversification. And really, it sounds a little boring, but we're going to make sure to make it fun for you. My name is Eryka Gemma. I'm very well known in the city of Miami for opening up the Bitcoin Center here with Nick Spanos and Scott Spiegel a couple years ago. Really invested into the community to try and build up something. And now you guys are all here today, so it's great. Now I have a digital asset venture fund called TimeLock.Ventures, and really the point of today's panel is to help those who are in the retail space of cryptocurrency and maybe want to transition into the institutional space. So I have a great panel for you guys today, and it's just about connectivity. It's really important to have a team behind you. So first I have Neil. Neil works with Fireblocks. Any Fireblocks customers in the room? Right here, okay. And he leads business solutions in the Americas for Fireblocks, a digital wallet infrastructure, transfer, and settlement network with over 800 customers across all market segments, including crypto-native exchanges, market makers, neobanks and fintechs, and traditional financial institutions, such as global custodial banks, asset managers, and funds. They do have a booth if you guys want to check them out. And then we have Andrew. Give it up for Andrew. So Andrew is the managing partner of Clearwater Digital Partners. They are an investment manager focused exclusively on digital assets. And then we have Brian. Brian is our attorney in the group. Give love to your attorneys, guys. They don't get enough love. So Brian is partner at Morrison Cohen's corporate and investment funds practice. Morrison Cohen is a full-service New York law firm that has significant expertise in regulatory matters in the blockchain space, but it views blockchain as a cross-disciplinary industry to which all practice groups can be helpful. So lawyers, you guys are the ones that are really figuring out what we can do. That way we can ask for permission, not for forgiveness, right? All right, so to get started, Andrew, we're going to start with you. Why did you start Clearwater Digital Partners, and what have been your keys to success so far?
So that's a really great question, Eryka. When I think about the genesis story of Clearwater Digital Partners, one word comes to mind, and it's talent. All of us have talents, and all of us are here because we believe in the transformative nature of blockchain technology, and we want to support and grow the space. That was a common theme yesterday, and I think it's a common theme today. The question is how do you best take those talents and turn them into meaningful actions that support and grow the space? Some of you guys are incredible coders. You guys can develop the backbones to some of these very inventive protocols and projects. I could never do that. Brian's an awesome attorney. He helps clients think through the legal and regulatory considerations in the digital asset space. And then, of course, Neil, he could talk circles around me when it comes to the technical aspects of security in the digital asset space. So as our team went through the discovery process of how do we take our talents, our accounting background, I'm a CPA by trade, our ability to conduct deep fundamental research, and our ability to construct risk-managed, well-diversified portfolios, something like this, something like Clearwater just made sense. There wasn't a really good opportunity for individuals and institutions to participate in the opportunity or in the growth potential of the digital asset space. We have investors that have zero knowledge of the digital asset space, but they see the power, they see what it's going to become, what it can become, and they want to participate. And they wouldn't be doing that if they didn't have an option like this. We also have investors, much like a lot of us, that have probably been very, very successful in the digital asset space personally, but they don't want to take the time, the energy, or conduct the due diligence that's required to look at well-balanced, diversified portfolios. They want a professional to do that. And so again, like a lot of businesses, when you think about, okay, what's currently in the marketplace? What do my talents support? Clearwater made sense. And so for all of us here, if you haven't thought about that, think about what are your talents? How can you best support and grow the space? The other thing that you talked about, Eryka, was success. Two of the biggest keys to our success are sitting right next to me. Brian and some of the things that he's helped us think through. I mean, I know we all have opinions on attorneys, but I've never met one that actually is like a great favorable attorney, and so Brian has introduced me to that concept. And it's a little bit challenging operating in this space where there's not a lot of regulatory clarity. And we heard that on the regulatory panel yesterday, that regulation is coming. And so he's helped us do that. Neil, with Fireblocks, they've provided a secure ecosystem where we can have a peace of mind of self-custodying our assets. So I want to give these guys an opportunity to talk about how they view the space, their keys to success, and how they're helping clients do the same.
Yeah, so talking about building teams, right? It does take a team. And right now, if the statistic is that 95% of the world's population doesn't have Bitcoin, then the 5% like us that do, we need to be working together. So talking about teams, talking about how the three of you work together to make this happen, to make institutional money be able to invest into Bitcoin, something that years ago was a dream, right? And now it's actually a reality. So on the regulatory perspective, Brian, you want to shed some light on what's happening there, and how you've been able to, from a regulatory perspective, knowing that laws are being written every day in real time, how are you able to help funds like Andrew's have success?
Thanks so much, Eryka. What's happening right now is really just remarkable. I feel like I'm on 4 or 5 calls a week with people that have done well themselves investing in digital assets, and their friends and families have seen them do well and say, hey, I would love to give you some money to invest for me, and they don't know how to do that, of course, so they call me up, and we talk about setting up funds or investment management firms for them. And we're able to help them from that stage where they literally have just been trading for their own accounts to get to a point where they could take in outside capital from investors, and with the view towards ultimately becoming big enough to be regulated by the SEC, to be a registered investment advisor if they need to be, to develop a compliance program for them, to do it all the right way so that when institutional money inevitably does come into the space, which it is right now, that they'll be ready to pass due diligence. They'll be ready to have those meetings where the institutions come inside and ask them, how do they implement controls to make sure that negative things don't happen, that you're custodying assets properly, that you're complying with the regulations that the regulators have set for you, and we've been able to help them grow. But the really nice thing about my firm right now is we're all very invested in this space. It's not just fund formation, what I'm doing. I have a partner, his name is Jason Gottlieb. You've probably seen him before on publications. He writes a lot. But he's really been in the space since it began, and from a regulatory standpoint, he's responsible for a lot of inquiries that our clients are receiving from regulators, both federal and state, and even criminal inquiries that are going on. So having that ability in-house to advise people when the people that you don't want to ask questions are asking questions is priceless. And then aside from that, we have an IP group where it's very important in the NFT space, for example, to make sure that you're adequately protected, that you actually own what you're selling, and even in general corporate and commercial practices. These are just businesses, right? I mean, blockchain is a thing, we're all here for it, but the bottom line is it's just another industry, and there are contracts, and there's relationships and governance and things like that that you need to think about like you think about in any other industry. So we have corporate partners and associates that are helping our clients construct deals, to draft commercial contracts for, moving mining equipment somewhere, and revenue sharing if there's going to be a split of revenue from the mining equipment. It's really just become a very diversified, cross-disciplinary practice, and it's fascinating to watch it grow.
And that's a great way to look at it. Everything that's happening in blockchain has already existed, but what's happening now is it's much more efficient. So we need people like you to make sure that people who are asking for permission, not forgiveness, are not going to have to ask for forgiveness, I guess. So Neil, another huge part in this more efficient way to do business is custody, right? Custody of assets has always been something that we've needed to worry about, especially assets that are of high value. So do you want to talk about Fireblocks and the services that you provide to other companies in the institutional space?
Yeah, for sure, and appreciate the question and being on stage here. I think we've got a great panel showing or providing different views of how to really look at this ecosystem. And from a Fireblocks perspective, we're delivering secure digital asset wallet infrastructure that enables our customers to direct custody and manage their assets. And really importantly around that as well is building out a governance layer, network, and ultimately an ecosystem that can then be tapped into. And when we look at where Fireblocks has come over the past 3 or so years, it really started out as focused very much on the sell side of crypto. So think of the market makers, exchanges, and lending platforms. And over the past year or so, we've expanded our focus to really look at the asset management, the fund side, the neobanks and fintechs who are looking to ultimately tap into this ecosystem. And the really exciting part for me is that anything that has to do with crypto, whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's stable coins, whether it's tokenization of assets, the core infrastructure behind that is ultimately the digital wallet. And so what we've done is really focused our efforts on building best-in-breed and best-in-class wallet infrastructure, and then ultimately establishing partnerships and integrations with other best-in-breed solutions. So if you think along the lines of order and execution management systems and trading platforms, KYT, AML, tokenization platforms, what we've done is enable this broader ecosystem so that when these institutions come to us, once they have the legal and regulatory clarity about what they can and can't do, they're able to tap into our infrastructure and our partners to be able to really build a business on top of us and really deliver to market whatever their market segment or customer base is ultimately looking for.
Yeah, so definitely important, right? Just who's going to custody these assets? That's one of the most complicated questions that's happening right now. You know, in 2020, the OCC, the Office of the Comptroller of Currency, said that banks can custody crypto. But how many banks have actually taken up that? You know, and the reason why is because custody is a huge issue. So Fireblocks is one of the companies that is really solving that. Now, Andrew, you also mentioned in your talk, you mentioned diversification, right? So diversification of skills within different humans, between different mindsets on your team. You know, having a global team is great because you have people who have different outlooks on the world just because of how they were brought up. But now diversification is key, a key investment strategy in general, but how about in crypto?
Yeah, so when we think about diversification, first, take a step back where we've come over the last year. So it wasn't that long ago, let's say December 2020, the majority of people perhaps didn't even know what Bitcoin or Ethereum was. Probably all of us got the experience, and maybe we still do, but hopefully to a lesser extent, I know to a lesser extent for me, where you're like, oh, how are you? What do you do? And then you start talking about, oh, I work in the digital asset space. And you kind of get this glazed eye look back at you like, I don't know what the heck that person is saying, but it sounds really cool. And yeah, that's cool. Fast forward now to where we are, January 2022. You see CNBC and Bloomberg flashing the price of Bitcoin and Ethereum across the screen throughout the entire day. And you see that we've kind of gotten out of this mindset that, okay, the digital asset space is kind of a nifty space. It's kind of like a Beanie Baby space that's just a fad and it's going to go away. It's clear it's not going away. And you've gotten to the point where large global investment firms are making billions of dollars of investments into the space because they realize that not only is Bitcoin going to survive, but it's going to thrive. So it's really been great to see a lot of these mischaracterizations kind of dispelled in a relatively short period of time. But Eryka mentions diversification. And when we think about this, we believe there's still this mischaracterization that we're working to dispel, that there's no diversification benefit of being in the digital asset space. So that is to say that the return correlation in the digital asset space is one. Within the digital asset space and the digital asset space to traditional legacy assets like the S&P 500 or NASDAQ. So as Bitcoin goes up, all digital assets go up. As Bitcoin goes down, all digital assets go down. As the stock market goes up, digital assets go up. As the stock market goes down, digital assets go down. Objectively, this just isn't true. Empirically, this isn't true. But you can't just say that. You have to say, okay, this is a common misconception. Let's prove that that's not the case. So what we did is, having a traditional finance background, we said, let's take traditional finance concepts, what's well accepted about diversification across a sector analysis, and diversification across market weighting, so small cap, mid cap, large cap, and what does it look like if you apply those concepts to the digital asset space, and then compare them to the traditional finance space. And it's really surprising. So let's start with the sector diversification classification. So if you look at the return correlation across the sectors in the digital asset space, plus or minus 15. And again, we're just looking at what have they done over a long period of time. So I'm not talking about periods of crisis where all assets, legacy assets, digital assets, assets across the globe tend to work in tandem, short periods of time, 2 or 3 months. We're talking about return correlations over longer periods of time. When you look at that, you find that in the digital asset space, the diversification benefits of having like an exchange token versus a gaming token is really very similar to having a stock in the financial services sector versus the consumer discretionary sector. Who would have thought that? That's to say that there's a huge benefit of having both in your portfolio. Not very well known. Even more surprising is if you look at the diversification benefit by market cap, so small cap, mid cap, large cap. Again, traditionally accepted for the past 100 years in the traditional finance space, the correlation in the digital asset space is actually lower than it is compared to the traditional finance space. That is to say that the diversification benefit is stronger in being in digital assets. Huge surprise. But that's all fact-based, that's objective, right? Just as important is what our experiences show us. Is this true in our experiences? And there's tons of examples we could go through, but pick a recent time frame. From mid-November to mid-December, we had a time period, it was not very favorable to Bitcoin and Ethereum, and it hasn't been that favorable to Bitcoin or Ethereum over the past few weeks. But look at something like Luna and the Terra ecosystem, a stable coin. From that time period, that doubled. So think about having a portfolio where you just had Bitcoin and Ethereum versus having a portfolio where you had Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Luna. And that's just one case. The risk profile is lower, but the return potential is still there. And so I guess what I'm trying to get at is most individuals, most institutions, pretty much all investors would benefit from well-researched, well-due diligenced, well-constructed, risk-managed, diversified portfolios. And that's just not something that has been thought about in the digital asset space. Why do we all care about diversification in the digital asset space? We're all here because we want to support and grow the space, and we want people that are outside the space to come into the space. Let's face it, the human psyche is not used to having volatility of 11 to 15% every single day. You know, we're all in this space, and even for us it's hard, but we've become accustomed to it. But if we're going to get other individuals outside of the space, get 401ks into the space, get large retirement funds into the space, we have to dispel this misconception that there's no diversification benefit because it's just not accurate. And I think the more we talk about this and we look at some of these things and we look at the facts and all of us go out into the communities and say, you know what? Is it really as volatile as you think if you properly manage a portfolio? I think that's important for the growth of the space. And that's how we think about diversification at Clearwater.
Yeah, so diversification, you guys, very important. How many of you in this room, and feel free to not raise your hand, but you should participate, how many of you own cryptocurrencies? Very good. How many of you, keep your hand up if you own more than one, and keep your hand up if you own more than two, and how about more than 10? Diversification, good job, you guys. So fire blocks, right? From an institutional perspective, you guys are allowing diversification. A lot of companies will only provide services to Bitcoin and starting to get into stable coins. But for fire blocks, you guys have really opened up that playbook. Do you want to expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, I think just piggybacking off of everything that was said there, there's different ways to really view the market and where you want to insert yourself and what your strategies are. And I think having that direct custody and ownership and control of your assets is really step one in that journey. And from a Fireblocks perspective, we support over 850 tokens across over 22 protocols, and effectively are working on a quarterly basis polling our customers to really understand where's the demand, what are they looking for, and what new token support are they requiring, and we embed that within our roadmap. So it's really a customer-driven focus for our company to really understand the market, get that feedback so that we can ultimately deliver what our customers are looking for. If we then think back to some of the other opportunities around staking and DeFi, having that really secure infrastructure to be able to access these different markets or sub-markets within the broader crypto ecosystem is really important. And I think that's the really exciting part, is that we look at it, no matter what market segment we're working with, we're really just giving our customers the tools to be able to access this ecosystem, and they can really go down whatever path they want. Anyone really just starting out, I love to use the phrase, like, let's not boil the ocean on day one here. We need to really have a focused approach, because if you try to do everything at once, you're going to do nothing right. And so really having that mentality, knowing exactly what your different phases are, how you're looking to prioritize your business is key. And obviously those insights are incredible, and I think everyone should really take that to heart. But if you're not in the space yet, really understanding and knowing what you're getting into is important, and then having those partners and working together from a regulatory, from an investment, from an infrastructure perspective is key to really enabling a successful business.
So Fireblocks did something recently that, from a VC perspective, I was like, wow, this is incredible. We really needed this. What did you guys do regarding DeFi?
So we've been doing some really, really cool stuff with DeFi. I was actually I did a presentation yesterday, if anyone was able to catch that, around permission DeFi, which is really a more risk and compliant way of accessing this ecosystem. Obviously, there's a lot of chasing of yields out there, but from an institutional perspective, concerns around, well, who am I transacting with? What's the source of funds? Which I think gives a lot of pause to a lot of the traditional players in really getting a lot of money into this ecosystem. And so what we've developed in partnership with Aave is this ability to tap into a DeFi market, which has participants which have gone through a base level of KYC and KYB. And so as you enter into this pool, as you pledge money to it, you know that while you don't know the specific counterparty you're facing off against, because again, it's still using that underlying concept of blockchain and decentralization, you do know that anyone that you are participating with has gone through that same base level of KYC and KYB. And so I think there's different things that are going to be done within the ecosystem to make it more palatable for a lot of the traditional folks. And I think, as you had mentioned earlier, the key to this is really not convincing folks in this room, but the broader markets, to say that, yes, this is a safe place to play. It's not the wild, wild west. I think we really need to get regulators on board as well, and that's in process. I think there's this working group that's figuring out what's going on with stable coins, which probably should have been done 3-4 years ago. And I think 3-4 years from now, they'll probably start to come out with regulations for DeFi, and we'll be well beyond that. But I
Can't keep up. USDF, have you guys heard about that?
I mean, it's just, it's going to be interesting, because I think we had a great conversation, Brian and I, with his partner Jason, a week ago or so, and I think there's just so many more questions than there are answers right now, and really the leaders in this space are going to really trailblaze and be able to help drive the regulatory education around this, so that we do have a framework to actually work within.
So Brian, let's say...
I just want to piggyback that. I understand why people may think it was the wild, wild west, though, and because it was, and early on. But now we're all here. We're like, okay, the space. We want the space to grow up, and we want it to become more mainstream. So that
definitely players in the progression, right? You know, beforehand it was a bunch of kids in a room wearing backpacks that had their private keys in the backpacks, and now it's not like that anymore. So, Brian, this next question is for you. Let's say that you have somebody in the crowd that is interested and they're in the retail space. Maybe they're traders, maybe they're already involved in cryptocurrency, but they want to get involved on the institutional side and take it to that next level. Do you have any tools, tips for them?
Yeah, it's a lot of what I'm doing these days, actually. You know, the way when somebody in that situation calls me up and says, you know, I've made a lot of money trading, I have some outside capital that I could bring in, what do? I talk to them about taking baby steps, because I think Neil used the boiling the ocean phrase. It's totally true. It takes a long time and to become a registered investment advisor, and to have your compliance program and your systems up to snuff, where institutional investors are going to be willing to come in. And you don't have to do that on day one. All you need to do on day one is figure out how to set up a legal structure to bring in the money. And if the money is less than $25 million, which in most cases, when you're just starting out, it will be, you don't have to register with any regulatory body yet. You call a lawyer up, you set up a fund the right way, you prepare the proper disclosures, you set up the fund documents, and then you bring the money in, you introduce them to the necessary service providers, an administrator, a custodian, and they're off to the races. And you say to them, when you get above that certain threshold at maybe 25 million, then you do a registration light with the SEC. You become an exempt reporting advisor, which means you're subject to the anti-fraud rules, but the SEC isn't giving you a routine audit and coming in. It's relatively simple filing that you do, and then until you get up to 150 million, when you have to fully register, you have the time to put in place the infrastructure and learn how to run a real investment management business. That's the right stage to do that. At the beginning, it's really just about learning how to bring the money in and do it the correct way. I know I answered the question. I want to commend Andrew for the answer that he gave on diversification for two reasons. A, I thought it was brilliant, and B, he spoke for a couple of minutes and did literally nothing to piss me off as his lawyer.
That doesn't happen very frequently, so you guys got to witness it, and now it's recorded, so I'm going to throw it back at him every time he gets angry.
He's listening to me. He actually listens. I'm so proud.
Very good. Listen to your lawyers, guys, especially when you're on stage. So 4 minutes on the clock. We're just going to do a quick fire ending round and provide some more value to our audience. So as we conclude the discussion today, I just want to hear what each of you guys are excited for in 2022. Go ahead, Brian.
All right, I'll try to make it quick. So I'm excited about the connectivity. I know that's what we started the panel with, but what I talked about before, the cross-disciplinary approach in my firm, the people that I'm meeting here tonight, today, yesterday, the introductions that I've been making, there's just so much going on in the space and so much innovation, and the industry is really maturing. So to see it all come together and watch people learn how to work together and actually grow and build something is just, it's very inspirational to me. The other thing, obviously, is the lawyer on the panel, and we've talked a little bit about regulation. I think that right now the SEC and the industry are talking past each other, and it's a big problem, and it's both sides' fault, right? The SEC says that we're saying, you're regulating by enforcement, you can't do that. And they can do that. They have the right to regulate by enforcement. That's their mandate. But that's not what we're saying, and it's not what we should be saying. What we should be saying is we are not complaining about you regulating by enforcement. What we're complaining about is you're not giving us guidance and telling us how to do what we want to do. And my partner, Jason, that I've talked about now 2 times, I wish he was here instead of me, to be honest, but he had a fireside chat similar to this one with Hester Peirce at DeFiCon in Brooklyn. And I urge you guys to watch it. It's on his LinkedIn page. You could find it from mine. But that's the inspiration. That was 2 people, a regulator and an industry participant, speaking with each other about the industry and what the real problems are and what we need. And if there are more of those conversations that happen and we stop criticizing each other, I think we'll get the regulation sooner than later, and I think it will be meaningful and it will be tailored to what we need from them.
So looking forward to regulatory clarity, very important. Go ahead, Andrew.
So as we conclude the panel discussion, when we think about a Clearwater kind of what 2022 and 2023 looks like, we're very optimistic. We think the future is incredibly bright. We're still going to have some bouts of volatility, but as we talked about, if you diversify, you can be less prone to that. But look at the creativity and the influx of intellectual capital coming into the space. All of us here, it's really, really uplifting. We see it every day at Clearwater. Just last week, one of our partners had 4 unsolicited employment inquiries from individuals from large name banks, large name funds that we would all recognize. And that's really great news for this space. Accompanying that good news, and we think this isn't necessarily bad news, but it's something to be aware of, we think there's going to be a bit of a change in the market structure. And Mark Cuban related to this yesterday. We think it's going to become a lot more efficient. And so the question is, as it becomes more efficient, as we get more regulations, as we get more capital coming into the space, it's inevitable that it's going to get more efficient. And so when we think about, okay, maybe in the past, an optimal investment strategy has been buy and hold in a single asset or a small basket of assets, we think that probably taking a more broad tactical approach that covers more assets is going to make more sense. And as importantly, that projects, new inventive projects, ones that have addressable markets of tens of billions of dollars, and ones that have proven product market fit, and most importantly, real world use case scenarios are going to be the ones that are going to accrue outsized investment gains. And lastly, I would say we're all here to be a resource. At Clearwater, there's a lot that I can learn from everybody in this crowd. There's a lot that everybody can learn from all of us. We've got our contact information out there. Reach out. Let's be a resource to each other and a resource to the other people that are in our lives that maybe aren't at the conference.
Yeah, and I know we're about at time here, but I think from a 2022 perspective, the exciting part for me, if we kind of zoom out a little bit, is consolidation in the space, M&A. I think we're seeing a lot of money come into the industry, and it's really promoting growth. But I think we're also, over the past couple of years, have seen this convergence of fintech and banking, as well as crypto and fintech. I think over the next year or two, we're going to start to see the convergence of all three now. And I think the release today of Microsoft and Activision is just kind of a step in that direction. And I think we're going to start to see a lot more of that because the market is very fragmented right now. I think if you look globally, everyone's focused on this concept of decentralization, but there still is a lot of centralization and very fragmented around that. And so I think as we start to see the convergence of crypto, fintech, and banking, there's going to be a lot more M&A activity as the bigger players look to get into this space, which I think is a bit of a push and pull. We're going to see how that evolves over the next couple of years, but I do think that there's a big catalyst for growth, which I'm super excited about. And again, everyone in this room, I think, has the same mentality, the same views, and it's really getting out there and promoting this and ensuring that we can bring in a broader ecosystem of participants to really engage and help grow and ensure that, that we're pushing this to the masses.
There is a lot to look forward to in 2022, especially for those of you in this room, because you are on the cutting edge and you're making the effort to learn about it. So definitely 22 is going to be great, and give it up for our panel.
Thank you, panel! Awesome info, guys.